Which, it's fine. We'll get to it.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. We have quite a few items on the agenda today. First of all, thank you for coming to our first of one of two listening sessions, community listening sessions for our after action report as related to the Eaton fire back in January. We really appreciate your presence here, and your feedback is important to us. Tuesday night's listening session will be here at the same place from 6 to 8 p.m. as well. So if you missed something and you want to come back, please come back. We have some coffee and donuts out in the back here. There's also a sign-in sheet, and there's also some additional material that will be helpful for you. Also some LA County material as well. A brief introduction before we get started. We have in attendance, we have Mayor Robert Parkhurst in attendance. We also have some staff members as well. City Manager Jose Reynoso, and we have our consultants, KJ Consulting here, that I'll turn over briefly. But before we get started, I would like for Mayor Parkhurst to come up and give a few words.
Thank you so much, Deputy Hernandez. So thank you all for being here. It's a really important event today. We heard you. We had a lot of people say that they wanted to discuss what happened during the fires and what we could do better in the future. So that's really the purpose of today's session, is to hear from you and to get feedback on what went well and what we can improve in the future. Also, at Tuesday's night's meeting, we heard you with concerns about metal contaminations in your homes. We have an extensive packet in the back that has lots of information about what you can do about contaminations to your property from fires. And in addition to that, we will have the County Department of Public Health come to our meeting on the 27th. I do want to stress that today we want to focus on the actual event, what happened around the event, what went well, and what we can improve. And that's really what the focus is of today. But we promise that we heard you from this as well, that we do want to follow up on it. With that, I'll turn it back to Deputy City Manager Hernandez to kick us off. And thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you, Mayor. I will now turn it over to our consultants, Kurt Johnson.
Thank you. Just a quick little introduction. I want to introduce myself and my team. My name's Kurt Johnson. I spent 30 years in the fire service here in Southern California, LA area specifically. And during that time period, I spent a lot of time not only coming to incidents up here, fires in the past, as well as being an emergency manager working with jurisdictions in the county. So I have a very good understanding of the community, as well as the county and the processes that go on. After I retired, I actually got involved in emergency management at a higher level, went to work for a county, and one of the first projects I was a part of was a listening session from one of the biggest fires that happened in 2020. It was called the LNU fire, and I'll let my former boss talk about that a little bit, because that was one of the projects we did, as well as after actions on other incidents, including COVID over the years. And people say, hey, that's not a big deal. Well, I beg to differ, trying to get feedback from people. And with that being said, the intent behind this is to allow you an opportunity to ask questions and that's to give you some sort of response. And more importantly than that, it's not just, some response for the, question about this particular fire, but what we can do to make ourselves better, more resilient, and also build out programming that might be able to be helpful long term. We're doing the same thing with city staff. We're finding out what they can do to maybe improve their capabilities, whether it be through training, exercising plans. So keep in mind, we're getting your piece today. We're going to repeat it again on Tuesday night. So if you want to come back again, you're more than welcome. But I also want to remind you, there's on one of the flyers back there, there's a QR code. We'll put it up at the end. It'll be up there. If for some reason you don't want to say something here, you're afraid of the critical view that somebody might have of you, go online, make an anonymous statement. Hey, here's what I want to find out about. Here's something that I think we need to do better. We'll take that, and we won't necessarily share who it was because it's anonymous, but we'll get that information into this after action that we'll then present to the city. And our goal, just so you're aware, is to try and have this wrapped up by the end of June. That way the city council can take it, review it, and then share it with the community. And then, if you will, the city staff will then work on a plan to actually try and implement some of those projects that might be coming in. As a matter of fact, one of the biggest projects that you can be a part of is actually underway as we speak. It's what we call the hazard mitigation plan. The hazard mitigation plan requires us to ask the community for information, ideas, feedback in terms of the way we can do projects, if you will, programs, as well as infrastructure updates that can actually be used to try and benefit the jurisdiction in a way where things are going to get better before before we have a repeat of if you will, of the Eaton fire. So that's a little introduction about myself. I'll let Dana introduce herself real quick.
Thank you. My name is Dana Carey. So going on about 20 years in emergency management, much of it up north. As Kurt said, I was the county emergency manager for Yolo County, and I've worked for many cities, tribal nations, doing emergency planning, emergency training. The listening session that Kurt's referring to was between my county and one that borders us. So 2 different jurisdictions, about 3 different cities involved, and that way we can hear what we can't see necessarily. A lot of times we'll work in emergency management on different systems and protocols, and we kind of go, I think that worked well, but we really don't know how it ends up on the end destination sometimes until we hear from everybody who encounters our message, our instructions, or anything like that in emergency management. So we really do want to hear from you today, any perceptions that you have, how it hit your kind of table, if you will, and ways to make it better. We're also interested in the good things that emergency management did. It's very easy to always point out everything that went wrong or needs to be improved, whatever nomenclature you're using, but we always want to give good kudos to those people who give up hundreds and hundreds of hours of their personal lives and everything to come and work on behalf of the city as well. So anything, good kudos things you have, we're interested in too.
Morning, everybody. My name is Calvin Curtin. I am a consultant working with Kurt on this project and other projects. My background really is a little different than most that work in this type of business. It's in marketing and public relations. I came to the emergency management role through a volunteer organization, volunteer opportunity through Stanislaus County, where I lived. I'm a native Californian, Central Valley most of my life, and started working in the PIO group with Stanislaus County. And about 17 years ago, started getting into this. I transitioned to a full-time public information officer for Turlock Irrigation District, which is the oldest irrigation district in California, 1887. They own and operate one of the largest dams and reservoirs in the state, Don Pedro Dam, 2,030,000 acre-foot reservoir. The district operates in 3 counties, and the dam, should it have a problem, could inundate 5 counties with water. So I was the emergency action plan coordinator for Don Pedro and all of the other federally licensed hydro projects for Turlock Irrigation District. So fairly familiar with emergency planning, wrote their local hazard mitigation plan, which I know Kurt mentioned, but would highly recommend that if you could get involved in that, because that's where your opportunity to talk about what's important to you in terms of lessening your your risk to some of these hazards lies. And so wrote that and many other plans, response plans, emergency operations plans, and many after-action reports from different disasters. We had to release water in 2017 from Don Pedro, which caused flooding downstream when Oroville was going on. So that was an interesting time. To the lightning fires, the Kurt mentioned the LNU fire. We were affected by the SCU fire, the Santa Clara County Unit fire, which burned infrastructure for TID. And so we're involved in that. So been involved and around this a long time. It's a passion. None of us do this work because we're getting rich. We do this work because we want to help, and we do this work because we have a heart for public service. And so that's why we're here this morning. And so we don't have a lot of information to present. We're looking to you for the information. It's a listening session, not a speaking session on our part. The speaking is your part. And we really appreciate you guys being willing to come on a Saturday morning and give your time and sit with us and talk about these issues. So thank you for being here.
So, as Calvin said, one of the things that we're going to do is we have a couple slides just to kind of get your cerebral juices flowing, if you will. Want to get the brain thinking, and one of the things we want to do after we did our introductions. And Miguel, was there anybody else that we wanted to introduce personally? Okay, cool. I just want to make sure before we jump in and go any further. So one of the things that we want to do is remind you that this is a listening session, like Calvin said. The intent behind it is for you to give us some feedback. Tell us what you think went right, went wrong. If you have recommendations for things to correct those are the kind of things that we're looking for from you as people that were personally impacted by the fire. And I will allow, if you will, some sort of extension from the fire to the mudslide scenario that literally happened shortly thereafter, because fortunate or unfortunate, the burn scar does have a direct impact, or I should say the mudslides have a direct impact from the burn scar, and it will for a number of years. One of the things that I've experienced over the years is that in some cases burn scars can take 3 to 5 years to recover, and although we don't get a lot of rain in Southern California, when we do get it, it seems to come in spurts, and it usually turns into mud. And as somebody that was actually personally involved in the response in the Montecito mudslides back in 2017, I can tell you that I always try and make sure that if there's something we can do to prepare for that side, we'll take that information as well. So, and you were all impacted by that just as much. On that side, it's not just about what fire did or what PD did, but I also want you to think about it from a standpoint when you look at all the different entities that have been involved in the response and the recovery. And even if we were to take a step back and look back towards preparedness, I know a lot of us may not have been involved in any sort of personal preparedness or agency preparedness, but if you can think about those things, that would be helpful. And then also thinking about it after the fact, it's like, what can I do for prevention and preparedness for, I hate to say it, a possible next time. So we're not just thinking about the Eaton fire all wrapped up into one little day, but we want to say, okay, what about that long continuum from back at preparedness all the way through to the future potential. On that note, and I kind of want to give you the back end of this, is we're developing this listening session and the one on Tuesday, and there's going to be some additional meetings to gain information. That will then be put into an after-action report. That after-action report will then synthesize itself into what we call an improvement plan. That improvement plan is not going to be done in a vacuum by us. It's going to be done in cooperation with the city staff, and potentially some involved interest parties in the city. And so with it, at the end of the day, the ultimate goal will be a product that can be left with the city with recommendations as to what to do moving forward. For example, it would not be out of this world if I was to hear somebody say, well, you know what, I want my house to be a little bit more resilient. I want it to be able to withstand, a fire next time. Well, maybe in that particular case, some of the feedback that we'll make will be a recommendation to the city staff, whether it be fire or building, planning, etc., to say, hey, maybe we should improve or increase the minimums for building code requirements so that when a house is built, it's more fire resistant. Those are the kind of things that we're looking to do is after we get your feedback, to take that to the next level, to actually have a product that we can recommend for somebody. In some cases, it might vet out as like, hey, you know what? Maybe we needed some sort of alert and warning plan. Maybe we needed some sort of shelter plan. And that'll be the kind of stuff we hand over and make recommendations to the emergency management staff to say, hey, here's some things that we can do to maybe improve the capability of the city in these opportunities. In some cases, and this kind of also goes back to the hazard mitigation plan that we're going to probably harp on more than one time today. That product, the hazard mitigation plan itself, is a very important product that currently, as we sit here today, you would not be able to see any potential state and federal funds coming back into your community for reconstruction or rehabilitation without that plan being in place. And so it's important that we take the initiative, take a part of that, because it's not just the only one, but that it is a, if you will, it's a hinge pin or a launch point to us having an opportunity to actually chase other funding sources. As a matter of fact, one of the projects that Dana and I did up in Northern California after the LNU fire was we got a couple of $1 million to go out and do vegetation management in communities where they couldn't do it themselves. And what we've actually seen after the fire in 2020, and keep in mind, we had a fire every single year for 7 years. That fire occurred, we did vegetation management big time. We haven't had an opportunity for those fires to grow much more than an acre at a time. The fires were held very small and with little to no impact on the community because we took the initiative, did some of that mitigation project work in advance. Now, I don't want to see us cutting down every wisteria bush and every jacaranda because that purple color is really important to us here. But I do think there's a need for us to actually look at those things, and that's what I'm going to hear you say if you think it's important. And those are the kind of things that you might find, funding sources out there in the future if you finish that hazard mitigation plan and if you can show and identify through like your this after action improvement plan of recommendations. So, as Dana mentioned, and I'll say it one more time, yes, a lot of times when we see these after action reports, it's with the intention of getting critical feedback. It's say, hey, what could we do better next time? But as Dana said, I will say this, and I know one of your firefighters who works at Disneyland, he was on Channel 7 News as part of our Disneyland parade, because of what he did here in Sierra Madre during the fires. If we can give a kudo, give a pat on the back, that's not a bad thing either. So with that being said, long term, give me some feedback. If you want to give some of the kudos, that's cool too. So with that, we are recording it, so it's not like you're going to have to come up here, but if you are going to ask a question or if you have something to add to the table, I would love that if you could speak a little louder, and forgive us, we might actually repeat your question just so that everybody can hear it and we can get it on record, because we want to make sure that people that are not here have an opportunity to hear this and see this as well, and make sure our goal is to try and make it a whole community involvement. We want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to be a part of this. And if you know there's somebody that didn't make it today, as we said, we got a QR code on the paperwork. Use your phone, launch it, and I'll have it up here on the screen in just a second. Don't be afraid to share that with other people. You might know people that couldn't make it today. They may not be able to make it Tuesday. We've got a website. That website has an opportunity for you to actually go to it, input information, make recommendations, be critical or positive, whatever works for you. Want to make sure that you get an opportunity to give that feedback and your neighbors can be a part of that. So, as I mentioned, we'll try and get this wrapped up by the end of June at the latest. Get it to City Council for them to do something, to take it to the next step. Actually, the city staff, and then they'll decide where it's going to go from there. I would assume council for review. And that'll be the end of the project for us. So you won't see us, after you as a public probably won't see us after this next week, but you'll probably hear from us. If you signed in, we might send you emails saying, hey, any additional input, anything you want to add to it, because we want your feedback. It is very important to get your opinion on things. So with that being said, if you want to make comments electronically through the website, you're more than welcome. Also, on the paper that we handed out, I think it has Calvin's and my email on there as well. You're welcome to send us emails. We'll take that and we'll incorporate that into the process. So with that being said, any questions before we open the floor for feedback? Tuesday evening, and we're doing it back here. Yes, this next Tuesday, and it'll be at 6 p.m. right here. And it's actually on this flyer. If you didn't get one, oh, you did? You got it right here. Tuesday night's meeting is right there.
And on the comments, we just want to make sure that we are logging them, so we keep track of the comments, who made the comment, what they talked about, and then what we did with their comment, because we don't want you to think that your comment just went out into the ether and disappeared and we didn't consider it. So we do log it, and we report back, and sometimes your comment might be taken as spoken and put into some sort of, or the report, I usually say plan, because that's what I usually use them for, put into the report. Other times it may be combined with similar comments and then made as a recommendation, but we want you to have the opportunity to know, if you want to know, what happened to your stuff that you said. Now we do redact your personally identifiable information if you provide it. If it's anonymous, obviously we don't have any information to redact, but we do redact it so that it doesn't appear in any public documents. So if you email us something from your email address, I don't include that in that report. So it remains anonymous from the client side. But anyway, I just wanted you to know that we do take your comments and we do work with them. They don't just go, oh, that's a nice thing to say, and we move on. We do consider them.
So we have about an hour and a half more, and we don't want to, take up your whole day unless you want us to. So what I would like to do is first open it up for anybody that has any particular questions, comments that maybe we can field now, get those on the record. Then I might toss out some subjects that I want to see if you can give me some feedback on specifically. So anybody have anything? Go for it.
How did you guys get involved in the first place?
So we started out as, so I've been in the area for most of my career. And so I know a lot of the agencies in the area, but I haven't done too much work in the last probably year down here, only because I spend most of my time up north. I was referred to, I think, the city manager's office by what's called a disaster management area coordinator. That person, she knew me, she knows me through different channels. Like I said, being in the area, being an emergency manager for some of the cities down here over the years, and that's how the connection was made. And they got multiple quotes and went out, and I'll let the city management staff advise on how they proceeded, but I was one of the ones that was recommended.
It seems like it was a good recommendation so far, so
Thank you. Any other questions before I toss out what I'll call my starter questions? All right, seeing no questions asked by you, let me ask you, did you feel back in January when the fire broke out that you were prepared? Go ahead.
I did feel somewhat prepared.
You didn't feel,
I did feel.
you did feel somewhat prepared. How did you have preparation that you were doing internally, or was it?
Since it may have been recorded, would you mind having people come up someday?
Okay, if you're good with coming up. If not, I'll try and repeat the question. So I'm getting the feeling he doesn't want to come up, but and that's just my take. His question or his response was, I felt like I was somewhat prepared, and which is an adequate response. All right, I wouldn't have an issue with that. But my counter question is, did you feel like you did it internally, or you got preparation from the city in anticipation of the event?
Completely internally and with Bob's help.
Okay, so just so everybody's on the same page, he's pointing to Bob saying, hey, Bob's helped me get personally prepared. And whether that be like, hey, do this in preparation, that is it's a very helpful tool, when we start looking at it, because not everybody is. I can tell you that a lot of people in the community that live in wildfire, areas, they are not prepared. They don't have their list of what they're going to take with them. They haven't been through their house to take photographs of everything. And that's a big part of our job, is making sure that we remind you all to get ready for it, because we can't all be there every single time to help you with everything that goes on. Young lady.
I'm happy to come down here.
Take it easy on that foot right there.
Yeah, this is a direct result of the debris.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I'm Deb Sheridan, and this is my 4th evacuation. A couple of them were actually not mandatory, but what I wanted to say, besides thank you for being here, and the city did do a lot that was right, that kept us safe. But on the other hand, I was really lucky because I called my son and said, "Here I come again," and just threw stuff into a suitcase. I was prepared, but none of us was prepared for the length that we'd have to be out. And it was very frustrating trying to get back in just to gather other things that we needed. But the reason that I'm telling you this right this minute is because I have so many friends that had nowhere to go. And they went to hotel after hotel, and of course a lot of the hotels in the area didn't have power. And they said, yeah, they went from one hotel to another. I think it might be in anticipation, because it will happen again. Have a list or phone numbers. We all have cell phones these days. Where am I going to go? And that was the biggest, I think, the biggest problem that I heard, especially those with animals. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'll, if you don't mind, indulge me for a moment, just so I can kind of give you an idea, and then this will definitely be taken in as information, because it is an issue. What you're referencing is a term that we like to call evacuation and reentry. There's another component you talked about, which is called sheltering. In both those cases, we just finished a big project up in the Central Valley of California, where we did an evacuation plan for an entire county. And when you look at telling, a big population of people, and let's just say it's a couple thousand, 10, 15, 20,000 people, if you just tell them, hey, you know what, get out of town, they're not going to have any place to go. They don't know where to go. They don't know what's open for them to use. And I'm not saying that we're going to sit here and babysit every person, but there is a need for us to make sure that we're at least pointing people in the right trajectory. Is the north arrow north all the time? And that's part of our job as a community, is to make sure that we're taking care of all those folks, to make sure they're going in the right way, especially if it's a population of folks that don't know how to maybe use an app to find the closest, Holiday Inn or Marriott or whatever it is, and you're just literally driving down the street trying to find hotels. It is a difficult thing to do. On that same note, with regards to evacuations and reentries, the reentry side of it is a very complex process. And as some of you that are that have been a part of this evacuation that's gone on, and if you've been watching what's been going on over in the Palisades fire, in other parts of this fire, it's not something that's out of the ordinary. That process in some cases can take months, if not years, to get people back into their space because of the speed that it takes to clean up the sites. Fortunate, unfortunate, I'm not sure which it is. There's been conversations at state and federal level of trying to get people in much faster. I think sometimes it feels like it's not going as fast as we'd like it to go. I think having a real plan of attack of how to put people back into the community is very valuable, and that is something that is definitely one of the recommendations that we've already talked about between the three of us as it relates to it, because having not looked at all the documents that the city has, it's definitely one of those areas that reentry is a big lift. And for people to understand, the reason why it's a big lift and it's a delay is because we're trying to make sure it's safe before we put you back in that space. And when we say safe, we're not just talking about public health safe, but we're talking about power lines being down, road conditions being adequate. In some cases, you might even have issues with your water system because of, the heat that might impact, the piping. So there's a lot that goes into that reentry. And yes, we want to get you back as fast as possible, but sometimes it can take some time. But that is definitely something we'll move forward. On the shelter operation side, we've done shelter planning before for communities, and hotels are just one component to that. And in some cases, the community members can afford to pay for hotels. We've done plans for communities where they don't have the ability because maybe they're on a fixed income, such as like Social Security or et cetera. One of those things that we try and do is not only address the person, but also their extended family, such as pets, as you referenced. It's law. We have a responsibility to make sure that not only finding people, shelter operations is part of our job, but also to make sure that their pets are part of that process. So It is one of those things that will definitely work towards, pointing the city in the right direction as it relates to that, if there's not an existing shelter plan. But also keep in mind that in many cases, we do have shelters that are available, after the evacuation order is put out, and the message is out for evacuation. I won't say order. And in some cases, people choose not to go to those particular shelters because maybe they don't want to go to a congregate shelter in a gymnasium or what have you. So there's a lot more that goes into it other than, hey, just get out, go to a shelter. It could be, hey, I need to use some alternative shelter operations. Anything you want to add to that? Or
Evacuation is the difference between warning and order. Maybe that's
Yeah.
always confusing.
Yeah, and that is a good point. When in the last couple of years, we've actually seen some, and I haven't heard anybody say anything yet about it, but one of the things that has really come to the surface in terms of notifications to the public with regards to evacuations is the terminology. There's all these mandatory or voluntary. Is it a watch? Is it a warning? You hear all these different terms. One of those things that we try and do is as if you will, consultants to the city, is we'll make recommendations to kind of clean up terminology to make sure it's consistent across the board, so that if you happen to get a message from Pasadena because of bleed over, you're getting the same message. Or if the message you got from LA County Office of Emergency Management bled over here into Sierra Madre, which it did, because I know it ended up in Orange County where I live, and so it's very likely that when you get that message, you want to make sure that the terminology that they're using in this jurisdiction is the same as it is in another jurisdiction, so that we're consistent. And that goes across all kinds of things. I know in the fire world, having spent time in it, terminology, so that you know what the same piece of equipment or the same process is consistent. Hopefully that gives you some ideology and where we're going to go with that. I thought I saw, go ahead.
On top of that, excuse me, a lot of people didn't know what zones we were in, and even though it said zone 8, zone 9, or 9A, whatever it was, there wasn't like a, I forget what app it was.
Genesis.
The apps were great, it's just they didn't have the explanation of where you were. So, and then the maps obviously on a phone, which most people have, were just really, very generic. So, and it's not anybody's fault per se, I understand what everybody's trying to do, it's more like, I think you could have just had something about like streets or something like that on some other page that they would link to, because all we do is run around trying to find out what zone you're in to be able to get back in, or to apply for it.
So, in case you didn't hear in the back, his comment was, I didn't know what zone I was in. I didn't know where I was at in the system. When you look at Genesis, and you look at the mapping, it can become somewhat difficult, to work through. One of the big, I will give Dana some kudos here. One of the projects she worked on up in Northern California with one of our counties, and put this to context, this is before Genesis even existed. As a matter of fact, Genesis came to her and asked for feedback as to how they think their system would work, because she designed a very similar system pre-Genesis. We had a campaign, which can be one of those things that when we look at recommendations moving forward is what we call a Know Your Zone campaign. And whether it be like you and your zone, maybe your friend's zone, your mom's zone, whatever it might be, knowing your zone is very important, because when you finally get that message that says, hey, zone 6 evacuate, you're like, oh, I'm zone 5, I don't need to worry about it. But once it says 6, it's like, all right, cool, I'm on my way. And I think that is one of the biggest things that we can do. I hate to say education and outreach is very valuable, but it is, and when you think about, trying to get people conditioned to evacuate, get conditioned to knowing when to go, some of that public education and public outreach is very, very important for that process. Dana, you want to add anything to that?
I just want to make sure I'm taking notes. I'm not like tweeting my friend or anything. So you're saying that instead of just saying the zone number, saying like the bounding streets and thing helps you orient where you are.
Something like that, or if there's like a separate page you could link to, say, do you know what zone you're in, and just input your three-number address, in our particular case, and the name of the street, 623 Woodland in my case, and then they say pop up and say zone page or whatever it is. But if there's somebody just to have a quick look up for that, one, because we spend so much time outside the evacuation zones, especially at first, trying to figure out occupant phones and then looking at coverage to figure out what zone we're in, and it was all like a guess. So we go up to the top cops that were trying to let us in, and they were doing a great job, but thought we were zone 8 instead of zone 9, whatever it may be, and then you're in things long enough to get back in, and it's not that you're wasting your time, it's just more like we could have just not been in line for so long to not know the zone we were actually in. And so that was something new to us, having the zones, at least somewhat new to us, even though we were involved in the fires, and the last big fire is the last two big fires, really. So I've been here for almost 30 years, and so I have a little bit of experience with it. This one was definitely more of a challenge for us as well, because we're still getting hotel since the day of the fires. But to get back into, to get some of our things, even though we got the same family patterns that we've had for a while, and we got better at it. And then we still snuck in, but I mean, we couldn't carry stuff out. So there's always way back into the canyon. So, but I guess my point is that it's not anything I think one thing was really angry about. It was just a lot of confusion.
Yeah, no, and I think that goes back to what Kurt was saying about one of the things that we might be recommending is a repopulation plan, because it goes into things like my repopulation plan. We used to educate the public to keep something with your address in your glove compartment, whether it's a utility bill, especially if it's not on your driver's license, because you have a different address on your driver's license. Because then the people manning the traffic control points are not always our local law enforcement. We borrow law enforcement from all over the state during these things. And so it's a little bit easier for them to identify when they're actually interfacing with a resident in that case. So that the repop plan is on there. It might be worth us even making a suggestion to Genesis. Their new Genesis Protect app actually does have a lookup feature, but it's a little hard to find on your phone. It's really just on the left-hand side when you're looking at it on a screen, but it's very tricky when it's on your phone. So that is a recommendation. Genesis is a private provider, so we can put those recommendations down. Whether they implement them into their software, it will be something we can recommend.
One example would be, you kind of think of it as a third grader when it comes to freaking out in the emergency exit mode or which all the
Well, in PIO world, we actually
Oh,
say.
yeah, 4 grade levels lower.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I do that because I volunteer some time for as a helicopter pilot with some of the fire people when I'm not here or whatever, just to hold some hours. And so that's one of the things we talk about is just to remember that the third grader is who's supposed to use and the intelligent person you meet the day before. And so that third grader is trying to figure out what to do on the phone, and that just doesn't work when you're stressed and full of drama and your kids are yelling at you and crying because they're hungry because you can't do all this kind of stuff. And let alone my dog, for example. But so granted, if you are good on the phone one day, you're not going to be so good on the phone when all this is going down and you're looking at the fires, they're only 150 feet away and they're coming at you so fast, what do you do? So you run, but you're not going to think about how to get on the phone and figure out the zone.
Yeah, so just to kind of recap that, I know that we are recording, another thing that I'm writing down is just to look at how we interface emergency public information wise with everyone outside of the city, whether they be resident or visitor or such, because you're absolutely right. In times of stress, our cognitive ability kind of goes down a little bit. And so the more simplistic our messaging, the more simplistic our emergency public information, a little bit easier than for whoever's reading it, especially if they're not from here and don't know Sierra Madre, to kind of comprehend what's going on.
And people that are in Airbnbs that have no idea how to do that. And we did help a lot of those people, in addition to carrying all their suitcases down the road. But it was, we're all going to help each other, but it was difficult to just kind of figure out where we're supposed to.
Okay.
And if I could add to that, also, if there's some way to let the people that are guarding our streets know with just a basic map, because as I said, I've been evacuated 4 times, and my street is very, very small. We only have 14 houses, and every single time I said, I live on Valley Vista. Well, no, you can't come in then. But there's my house. So, it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. And that is really a challenge. I mean, I can tell you I have many small police departments up north, so when we get these fires come in, we get everybody in the world all over California. And so to try to get all that stuff out to the traffic control points, I know we've thrown maps in cars and sent them out and stuff. So there's some solutions that we can note down in here as well.
All right. Any feedback from anybody else? Any questions? I haven't gotten any questions from anybody back there in the back row. Comments, good, bad, indifferent?
Carter, my wife and I, we built our home, actually lived in a trailer and built it, so the evacuation was a little bit disheartening from the day after. Obviously, we left the night of the fire. My ring camera recorded the entire fire as it moved from the Eaton area across and took out everything on the mountainside to almost Arcadia boundary. The reason I'm here is because my friend Deb Sheridan and I are two of the people that worked diligently for a few years trying to stop the monastery project, which is not, I'm not here to talk about that project other than the fact that we are still wondering where it's at right now because of its ability to allow a fuel transition directly into the city, starting at Fairview and Carter, and creating what happened in the Palisades and Eaton Canyon and Altadena. It was exactly as I stood at that mic on at least 2 occasions and said, having lived through the 2011 windstorm, where I saw trees literally snap, it was evident to me, growing up in a fire department family, that if that wind was with a fire source, it would create a firestorm. And having graduated 50 years ago from the PCC fire science program and dealing in those 2 years with history of major conflagrations and how they worked in cities like Chicago and San Francisco, and seeing what those cities did to mitigate the potential conflagrations, I see now, because our city allowed that monastery project to go through. If it had been in the beginning stages of construction, I expect that there most probably could have been far more catastrophic outcome on the northwest section of our city. So why I came here and listening to you and being a little bit disappointed, not in you guys doing your job, I do appreciate your service, but we're not talking about the real problem. And the real problem is our climate's changing. We're having catastrophic situations that are devastating much of our country and what we've just seen here in Southern California. And as I'm listening to you, you're discussing traditional methods and looking for new answers to deal with what happened. Nobody's talking about the fact that this could happen again in a few months. And I also noticed that when we get our Santa Ana winds, there's something odd, and I'll tell you why. Because I sit on my phone and I watch my wind direction. And when they, of course, we all heard the news. It's coming. It's going to be offshore. And we know how that worked. We saw it in Altadena. Created a wall of fire. Same thing in the Palisades. And when I watched during the day, because we didn't have the fire during the day, and I watched the Palisades, and it just blew my mind that the cars that were all bulldozed. They froze their roads, which are 3 and 4 times wider than our roads. And they're going to use my street that you can't even pass another car if there is one car parked. And they're going to allow our street to be considered the second street of ingress and egress from 700 car trips a week, is what they told us from the monastery project. So I saw the Palisades, which had far more than what we have, and their streets froze. Fire apparatus couldn't get to where they needed to be. People couldn't get out. That's what we're looking at. The wind in Sierra Madre, and nobody's talking about the fact that when the rest of this area is offshore, there seems to be some type of Sierra Madre swirl, because I watched the wind. It is offshore in certain areas and it swirls back. And then I realized that we only lost 12, 13, whatever houses, and who knows how and why, and they weren't all grouped together. So we do have, and if you look at the history of Sierra Madre over 100 years, we've never had a firestorm. But what we saw in Altadena, if that were to happen in Sierra Madre, in other words, the wind's totally offshore, if the fire were to connect to the fuel source, block after block of combustible homes, there could be, and this I would only say, I learned this from listening to battalion chiefs, fire chiefs, talk about conflagrations. No amount of firefighters and fire trucks will be able to stop a firestorm. We just had one a few miles away in Altadena. We just had one in Palisades. We could have one here, literally to the point where every resident will need to run for their life because you won't be able to drive. The streets will be locked with cars. We will all meet on the other side of the 210 freeway and watch as our entire community burns to the ground. Nobody's even talking about it. And I don't get it. We've seen the windstorm. They're here. We've seen ignition, utility, arson, traffic accident, ignition. I mean, you guys are fire. Ignition, fuel, heat. It's here. You're not discussing it. You're not. That's the only thing I came for. I want to know, how are we going to be able to move this entire city out, running for our lives? Because we have each of these little fire departments. I don't understand why there hasn't been some type of a mandate to bring every fire service under one command, period. I know they have the Foothill Fire Service, you know, where county works with Arcadia, Sierra Madre, and why? Why are we having political agendas when we know this condition exists, it's going to get worse, and yet we're not doing things now to at least give us a chance later? So,
what is happening with the monastery project?
I mean, are you even aware of that?
It's not the scope of this, no.
Yeah,
But
see,
you're trying to look at the future and what we can do to maybe mitigate a major disaster. If that was under construction, I'm telling you, we would have lost half of Sierra Madre.
Understood? It will-
So as a resident, that's our concern about what we're gonna do towards the future to make it safer for us to live in the certain areas that would be impacted.
Understood. I heard what you said, and it will be, it'll be taken under consideration and passed up to the city.
It is very important because anybody who voted for that was duped, and we know who voted for it. But the problem is that that has always been a problem, and they never explained how they would do anything with fires and stuff like that. And I won't go too far into it, but the point is that that is very important. They're absolutely right to bring that up. So,
This is an open forum. Everybody's, open to giving the information. We'll take the information. I'm not negating it in any way.
yeah, thanks.
Anybody else?
Some years ago, I came across a term when I was in Louisiana.
Did you want to come up here at all, or you're welcome to?
All right. Sure, I don't fall down.
My name is Caroline Brown. I decided to calculate how many times I've evacuated from my house. I live in the canyon. I've been there for 56 years. And I counted up 9 fires. Not all of them were that close or that directly impactful. But I was first looking at it online on the TV, a fire in Malibu. Because the fires in Malibu would come down the canyon. It was like the town of Malibu was living at the bottom of a fire chimney. The canyon was the chimney blowing the fire in reverse to them. So what I started to say before I came up here and changed my thoughts onto that point was in Louisiana they were using a term called hurricane evacuation fatigue. And I think many of us that have lived through the Southern California Santa Ana wind conditions year after year just are on the edge of their seat waiting for the fire to break out. I sat at my house here on that Tuesday, was it the 7th, in the windstorm, listening to the wind just blow through my oak trees, waiting for one of them to come through the roof. Lucky for me, it blew away from the house, took out a big branch, and when I looked at that, I thought, what power is going on here with these winds? But still did not know about the outbreak of the fires because I wasn't watching the news. Some years ago, we put together a redundancy here in Sierra Madre when everybody thought that the horn should go back online so they could use the horn the way they did years ago to alert the volunteer firemen. So many beeps of the horn, you went to one section of town, so many beeps of the horn, you went to another section of town. But there was a backup radio, an AM radio, because the thought was everybody has an AM radio in their car. Well, that's not the case today. So what do you do for a backup for an AM radio that's not in your car? You get yourself a hand crank radio so you don't have to worry about batteries going dead on you. The thing about preparation is practice. You can only do well what you practice often, and we don't practice in town. I went to a preparation out in San Pedro one time, early days that I was helping with the Fire Safe Council here in town, and they were actually doing practice, just random practices around the area. I've forgotten how they alerted their community to go out and a fire broke out, go do this type of thing. They were putting posts out on people's front lawns. So part of it is being aware that the people in the fire service, this is your occupation. You do this for a living. It's your concern day in and day out. But for the homeowner, it's an adrenaline overload that you kind of back away from. I think people are still experiencing quite a bit of what I would call post-traumatic syndrome, because I drive by a spot in my canyon that came within what would be considered a yard and a half on a normal street, where there were 3 outbuildings that burnt and the side of a garage that was scarred by that burning. And so I just, every day, it's like, how close did it come? And that sort of washes over you. And it's part of that adrenaline overload while you try to think about what's coming next. How long can we count on this fire burn as our sort of fire protection area? But the thing of Sierra Madre's fire, how it hopscotched across town, is astonishing. There's probably no weather commentary that could ever account for that. The other thing is that when it comes to the map and the evacuation, I think people who drive those streets every day appreciate the traffic flow that it takes. When I finally left the canyon, a neighbor actually had called me from Mitchell-Linden and said, did you see the fire coming through Bailey? And I had to get out of my house and go around I hadn't been out of the house because of the wind. Took a look at the glow on the hillside coming across from Bailey Canyon. So I didn't take all the kind of stuff that I normally would have taken if I'd have been thinking about it for the last 8 hours. But by the same token, I didn't expect to see my house standing when I came back. When people complain about how the fire was or was not fought, I thought, talk about trying to put out a blowtorch with a squirt gun. The same thing happened. I have property not too far away up near Paradise, California. And I know those embers were blowing a football field length a second, 60 miles ahead of the fire. So people don't want to live in a gravel pit. They don't want to tear down every possible oak tree. And I want to say one more thing about oak trees before I sit down, because I was able to mention this at the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy board meeting I attended last Monday night. Eaton Canyon Nature Center. The building itself is burned down twice, but the oak woodland is still standing. So I think some of Sierra Madre's vegetation may have helped, because they sometimes refer to oak trees as ember grabbers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Caroline Heldman. I'm a Lower Canyon resident, and just wanted to say I really appreciated the excellent warnings beforehand. I don't know if it was the county or the city, but I think I got an email or a series of emails 2 weeks before saying that there could be that we were expecting something. I think it might have been the county, and then very early warnings to evacuate as it was coming across from Altadena. I would love to see a community network, and maybe it exists, let me know, but something I would love to tap into of citizens who will volunteer to help evacuate, well, Airbnb folks, older adults who need the help, and also people with disabilities. We were just going door to door, and it would be really great if we had, we could sign up, or we just had a list in our community of folks who would need help during evacuations. Also, just wanted to praise the cleanup efforts, especially with the flooding. It was just extraordinary watching CAL FIRE working with other fire departments, and the speed of that cleanup. And we were trying to help, and they very politely took away our shovels, which I think might be code for please stop helping us. Also, law enforcement was really polite and kind in letting people back in. I wanted to say something that may not come up at these listening sessions. There is a rumor going around in the canyon, and I will say this is a rumor. It may have no basis in anything empirical, but there is a rumor that the canyon, because of the danger in the streets and getting in and out, that it was abandoned. And so I don't know if you know how many residents were abandoned by, like, maybe it's going to go up, abandoned by firefighting forces. Now, I was in and out. I did see a lot of firefighters, and I'll say that doesn't really quite support it, but there is a big rumor going around, which is why so many residents stay behind. And I don't know if you know how many residents were holed up in the canyon fighting spot fires. There is also the belief that had they not been there, that the canyon would have gone up. I know personally a team of folks who were working around the clock as Nature Friends kept igniting and kept igniting for many days, running shifts to make sure that that didn't go anywhere. So just wanted to let you know that the next time this happens, I did find out a lot of my neighbors are preppers, and so I'm just letting you know there will be residents who stay behind with gas masks and professional fire hoses because we believe that the canyon is maybe not getting the same level of attention. And it was especially, that belief is especially supported by the experience in this particular fire and the belief, whether it is true or not, that the canyon did not go up entirely because residents were essentially engaging in civilian firefighting. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just agreeing that basically that I just like one thing to add to that is that it has been said, even on the record, that where we live in the canyon is basically the stepchild of Sierra Madre. We kind of get things last. We do have a lot of misfits up there, but that's kind of what we sort of did great as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to really appreciate it, and sure they have, a lot of people show up in City Hall randomly that probably have complaints about different things, but I would say that we certainly seem to be frowned upon when we have problems in the canyon, and I agree with her that we really didn't have the support that we had hoped. And then I was, if I can say this out loud, I have a hard time saying this out loud. I was one of the people trying to save Nature Friends, and then I was up all night, and even with the stupid pressure washer, just putting out flames just because no one was around. And so we were looking for people to help, and it's not because the fire department, for any reason, it's just that they were told to come, and they even said this, and then we walked around the next day, and we saw fires coming up, and no one was around spotting fires in the Upper Canyon, and then we saw Lynn Bierman's place burning down, and no one was there, so we called the cops, like, hey, or the fire department, like, hey, please, come and put this out. It was a little too late, so there's a lot of confusion, and I get that, but it's just interesting how, again, that's because I just snuck back in the canyons to see what I could help do. But a positive thing, though, just to move forward to that, is that the mudslides, amazing, awesome help, wonderful people, everybody came and helped us out. CAL FIRE too, again, they had us put down the shovels. And the mud was gone as soon as it could possibly go. and some people got really hit really hard by that mudslide, and everybody was there helping out, from the city's employees to the public works employees to the fire department employees to neighbors so it was really great. So I definitely applaud you the city for mudslide for sure. So, and I'm gonna apply for the fire. I'm saying that guys in this room.
And along with what Derek and Scott both had to say, there were people too that stayed behind, that their property abuts the monastery property, and they put out fires in their fences, and that part of Sierra Madre would be gone too if it hadn't been for these individuals who were protecting their own homes. And that is a fight, and that's something that, as Scott had mentioned, we have said to city council more than once, what happens if there is a fire in the high fire severity zone? And it did happen, and it's only because these individuals stayed behind, and I know it truly was a perfect storm, that there weren't enough firefighters. I think people, Derek, who are crazy because they want to stay behind, I mean, they feel like they have no choice.
Haven't heard from you, sir. If you want anything to say? Okay. Check, come up.
I don't know where you want me to stand.
Wherever you like. It'll pick you up anywhere in there.
I'm from a family that's basically, you take care of what's around you first. You prepared, I've got numerous firefighter experience because of friends and family. I've got one paranoid family member that was also earthquake, so I was prepared. I was prepared for the long term, a month if needed, which worked out good because we had no electricity for, what was it, a week and a half. At any rate, I was able to feed not just myself, but a couple that was also there that had also run out. So we were able to work with each other. So as they mentioned, connecting with other people. I was, and I haven't heard this brought up yet, what time did everybody get notified of the fire? I actually received one, and I still got it on my call log, from a retired firefighter friend of mine from Edwards Air Force Base, crash and burn unit, who was in Minot, North Dakota, and he called me at 6:46 p.m. Actually, he called me a little bit before that, but I didn't answer because I'm not going to deal with him. I was dealing with winds. The winds had already, which I thought was that afternoon, oh, crud, I hope there's not a firebug out there. This is like the perfect storm. And then watching the fires by the coast, I just went, no. I realized then most of our fire department was probably heading to the coast to help them. Understood. Had a tree come down on my car. Great. Call the neighbor, and actually I just sent a text. I think I might need help if you guys are around, but you're probably asleep. Before I put the phone down, they were there. What's over? They came, chopped down the tree, cleaned up the car. I was able to turn it around and was ready to go. That friend that called me at 46 p.m. I think it was, turned around and immediately said, Linda, the fire's starting at the exact same spot it started in 93. Please get yourself, you know the routine, you've done this before. And I go, oh my gosh. And he goes, everybody's screaming the fires are going west. Well, you know firestorms and how they work out. And I go, absolutely, I'm going to get off the phone and start calling all my neighbors what I can do. First thing I called was the Eaton Canyon group that I grew up in, and let all those neighbors. Only found one, which ironically is a resident here, but I called him to let his parents know, which he said they'd already been evacuated, and it was the same as 93. People were running down Sierra Madre Boulevard with their horses in their hands because they didn't have enough
trailers to move them. They were just trying to prepare. Luckily, the fire bypassed most of that area. Poor Hastings Ranch, poor Altadena. At any rate, I then proceeded to contact every neighbor around me, knocking on doors, telling them, and I go, I realize you think the fire's only gonna go westbound from here, but please don't. Please know that they create their own storms. Turn your cars around, pack everything up in it, and when the fire department or whoever comes around, be ready to leave. It's probably going to happen. And as I proceeded to do that, I hit so many naysayers. No, never gonna happen here. It happened. Fire happens, the stuff came, I watched everybody do it. As I'm throwing stuff in the car, I had plenty of time. I kept looking around, checking on other people. I moved a couple of cars down to Orange Grove, a friend of ours who was there, allowed us to use their driveway. And I was surprised at seeing how some reactions were, we're just gonna watch this. Needless to say, everybody finally left by 4:30 in the morning. But the thing I hadn't seen was, one, my neighbor directly next to me, but almost behind me. They share a same driveway. I had been pounding on her door, calling her phone. I went around her backyard, knocked on the window of her bedroom. She had the TV full blown, but her hearing aids out, sound asleep. I begged the first fire department, police department, which came around on the bullhorn and said time to evacuate, which was approximately 8 something. And I begged him, please go do something because I can't get a hold of this elderly lady. And he says, sorry, ma'am, we're only here to give the evacuation on the thing. Can't help you. I, of course, noted that he wasn't from our city. Makes sense. He says, go on. The next time it went around about 11 or so, another guy, again, I'm begging him. I still can't get in touch with her. She's the only one I can't reach. Ma'am, I can't do that. I'm sorry. I have my orders. Off he goes. And I sat there going, this is so frustrating. At what point do I do something major? I then decided, okay, I'm not seeing anything, so I immediately put out, we had just painted all the paint buckets. After seeing what I saw happen by the coast, filled them with water all over the property, threw beach towels, threw old towels, rags, all over the property, moved every hose out into every direction, and then stood up and put what we call a scarecrow, a item that is a motion detector sprinkler. Hooked it up on my roof so that if it caught anything in any direction, it just sends off a water spray like a rainbird for 3 seconds. But that's enough, one, to get my attention, and two, to put the ember hopefully out. And then I proceeded to stay awake for 32 hours because by 4:30 in the morning I realized the wind had shifted and I still hadn't seen fire department go up into the canyon. And all I thought was, everyone's gone, I'm in a ghost town. You can do this. You've done this before. You can do it. I was in the Eaton Canyon one when that went through. So, needless to say, after it was all said and done, and the exhaustion and the electricity, yes, going in and out was a difficulty. After 4 days, by the way, my phone quit working, and I don't know if a lot of you know it, the best thing to do when your phone quits working, turn the thing off and restart it again. I was told it was part of the FCC emergency, so when things get overloaded, they close down. Turn it back on, all of a sudden I got my alerts again. It's just weird, things. So that's one thing I did learn about this one. And then I learned whoever neighbors, I was watching for looters, I was watching for other things as it came around throughout. Needless to say, we worked with the neighbors. I saw my own neighborhood, and I told everyone, please take your propane tanks with you. Don't leave them, please, so that the fire department comes over to help, and boom. I also found the neighbors had put notes on their doorways. There's a pool in the back, help yourself, which I thought was wonderful. These are just little things that could help out in the future, and that's all I wanted to point out was, please, it's when things become that catastrophic, we need to look out for each other around us first, and then expand out if we have the ability to. So, thank you.
I think almost everybody that's here has had a chance to talk. Sir, come on up. You know, I'm going to be very ill prepared. Take your time. There's no rush.
Well, first I want to address also the cameras. My name is Glenn Hickman. I live at 480 Fairview. I'm a little bit scruffy today. I'm still an active architect. I used to be an owner of McCarthy Building Companies. I'm still also an active arbitrator, construction arbitrator. Actually, I know someone who's in the state senate. He's a retired battalion chief for LA County. And I've been observing the progress. Excuse me, I just walked in. I've got a little bit of a cold. It's not COVID. So let me just say kudos to all of us and to Sierra Madre, the fire authorities, everyone and everyone. I'll tell you, you know, when we live long enough, we've seen a lot. And you think when you've seen it all, you haven't, right? And we've experienced it. We survived it. And how many of our neighbors in Sierra Madre, including Altadena, are suffering, right? And I know everyone's doing everything they can do. There are things in motion that I think most notably are the result of a failure for, I'll call it, more visibility. Not that there isn't enough visibility, but how do you get more visibility in motion and more interaction? I'm surprised. I came here because I just put on the boob tube and I said, how many people are in attendance? I expected this place to be full. Okay? Now there's another session coming Tuesday. I may still be here, come here, and be more prepared for some items. I think what I like to say is, put aside the past, it was painful. Look to the future. And what does it mean? I think it means that there are other communities like ours with few funds that need more enabling. I'm not saying for handouts, but to take notice and action of those resources that are out there. Let's take an example. You may not know this, but our city, in it's trying to take an understanding of defensible space, has put postings at Bailey Canyon and elsewhere that talks about passive solutions to fire, smoke, mitigation. But that's only one event. Who knows what's coming next? Nuclear, war, who knows, right? Okay, so we can only deal with what we know, and we can only deal with the resources available. I would say this. I sat in a little background. I sat in a 7-hour meeting virtually with the Department of Forestry, Zone 0 committee that is preparing regulatory language to move up to the Department of Forestry and further up the chain to friends like mine at the Senate level, who was on the Assembly level, not this districts, but these districts, to make decisions for the people. Now, are those informed decisions? I started looking at the CAL FIRE modeling that's used, and then I looked at Canada's resource hub for all the modeling that they use to look at fires. And a conclusion I came to was that after the 7 hours, after they spent about an hour talking about 10 pots, I kid you not, 10 pots that would be combustible, and should it be 20? Should they relax the draft language? Now, LA County, and you'll have to be aware that I know you still have an hour. I may take up too much time. There may be continuation. So, listening is important here, I think. And I am listening, and I'm glad you're listening. So, what are the city doing? What's our chief doing? You're doing your best. When I say you're doing your best, that posting at Bailey Canyon, and I looked at it, is an LA County defensible space for ornamental vegetation management. Right? And what's in there? Has anyone in the city looked at it? Has the fire chief looked at it? You cannot have a wisteria at your house. That's revenue to the city, right? Revenue. You have to cut it down. According to that, you got to cut it down. It says guide, a guide. But in reality is, As Zone 0 matures, for the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I would say it's not environmental, there has not been, from what I can tell, and I have legal beagles looking at it, that Assembly bill and Senate bill that became Public Resources Code, because it becomes code. Assembly bills become codified. If the Zone 0 gets codified, and the next round from LA County fire that we enable says wisteria's got to go bye-bye, well, my next door neighbor across the street has a beautiful wisteria. Let's call that Wisteria 2. It's going to be next on the tourism funding cycle. Okay? We need to take reasoned approaches at the council level, the manager's level, and thank you, Jose. You've done a wonderful job with water. We had enough water, I'm digressing a little bit. We had enough water. I called our director of water, not Jose, he's our outgoing manager. We don't want you to leave. So immediately after the fire, after a little bit of digression, I noticed that we had some sections blow out in our water system. They did. What does that mean? And so I called our director. I asked him, what are we doing? He says, we can only do what we can do because we only have this kind of money. I mean, that's me pounding. I pound because I say this. The northern section north of Grandview is at significant risk. If there are priorities and why we aren't whiteboarding these conversations, we should. As when I was in Owner McCarthy, we took whiteboarding and we were relaxed. You know, we should be relaxed to talk about this and put all the good ideas up and start circling. And you can do that real time. You can start circling. These things are important. What's one of the most important things we need to do here is we need to get that old piping, understand the realities of cost, bond measures, and recognize that as that stuff grows, and it's growing again wildly, we can't fight that fire. Let's be frank about it. We lost pipe section. We lost some on Grandview. The pumps were there. The water is there. And the manpower isn't. You can't fight Category 2 hurricanes. You cannot do that. It won't work. And that's what's wrong with Zone 0. That's what's wrong at a pragmatic level with our city. We're sick. We have a utility sick system. And so how do we solve these things? We need to be honest with ourselves. The safety bond measure didn't pass. But the safety bond measure called infrastructure for water was the reason why in part Palisades failed and in part why Altadena failed. The director for LA County Public Works was very clear in his conversation with Barger and the people. I may need my water. Hold on just a second. Sorry, I'm pontificating, but there is method to the madness. And I'll come up with some solutions while I'm talking. Give me just 1 second here. So the director of public works, he was very candid on the LAist. It was on the LAist Air Talk, Larry Mantle, some of you know that. And he said, you know, frankly, I'll paraphrase. Do we have enough money to put in the water system we need to fight these kind of fires? Are the people willing to pay for that? Are the people willing, didn't pass our public safety bond measure? So we need to really get real. I hate to say it. And we need sliding scales. I think we had that for that bond measure for safety. For those that cannot afford those increases in property taxes, for those that cannot, and those like me that can, right? Okay. So priorities, whiteboarding, circling what's relevant. I heard somebody that the fire's safe. I think it was, I don't know if it was Miss Brown or somebody, and I didn't put my glasses on. I thought I'd steam them up, you know. So if we whiteboard them and start to prioritize them, we start to say, okay, what are the priorities? Where are the resources? And you know what? Here's the reality. We are a good town, good people. We are underfunded. So what does underfunding mean in a moment of crisis, but need for action? It's the conundrum for all small towns. And our town is doing, I think, a very good job to address that. So solutions. The first off is that I suggest that there be a continuation to this, that, you know, hair's let down. Any brain thinkers, and I think someone put out something to look at the economic solvency of our city. That was something I did not join. I don't know if one of the council people did that. That was a good move. I think we need to come back in this room. We need to whiteboard it, circle those things as priority. I'm biased. I say without water, you've got no protection. But even if you had the water, you can't fight a category 2. You just can't. The monastery not being there, that development project not being there, if I were to use GIS, if I would use some of the fire programs that are out there, and I wanted to spend my personal wealth, I could prove to you why that development shouldn't be there. That blew the fire out. All right? Let's just face it. Okay? But that's my bias, without proof. Everyone talks about proof. Everyone pushes to the model. There are models, and they're good and bad and ugly models. And I've been there all my life to look at those models. Well, we could, while we're working at a interaction level with the people in the whiteboarding, and I'm going to circle, remember, water supply all the time. Okay. I would also circle other things. Like, we need to get involved with Zone 0. For heaven's sakes, this is Tree City, USA. And we have a meager budget, if at all. We lean on Frontier and Edison to do our tree trimming. Well, we have beautiful trees. What's going to happen when that CAL FIRE model, which shows a number, the red, the yellow, and the orange, when will it, at a very granular level, target our trees? I'm not saying we need to fight back. What I'm saying is we need to be informed. We need to look at the resources that are out there. And there are resources. I just spoke with a friend of mine yesterday. I'm not going to name him at the moment and the company. They provide cyberspace, data, stuff. Okay, I'll simplify it for even my brain. That looks at not just fire, it looks at labor to rebuild. And what does it mean? So it's not myopic like Canada is for fire prevention or CAL FIRE is fire prevention. And Zone 0 is saying you can't have anything in 5 feet. And LA County says, well, cut out the wisterias and cut out the cypresses and the junipers. And the oak trees, by the way, there is movement with Ventura County and other fire authorities that say oak trees are good. Then others would say otherwise. Who knows? So resources and solutions. All right. I'm sorry I missed the first 45 minutes. I missed we're in those solutions. I don't see anything circled up here. It's in everyone's brain. It's being recorded, I guess. Someone's taking good notes. Maybe it's our wonderful councilman. Sorry, which one is that, by the way? Who are you? Where are you? Oh, sorry. Robert, okay. Maybe someone is noting and sharing. I would have put it on a whiteboard. That's what we did when we were doing, billion-dollar projects. We whiteboarded, other people, all resources everywhere in the world can look at it. And I thought I was retired. I am. So I was talking with a friend of mine who was very influential in the LA Community College District infancy 20 years ago that mandated modeling to look at how we design and build. And I thought it was kind of a crackpot. But I'll tell you, I have learned that it's not just called GIS, but the modeling that we can do, and that we little cities and other cities should possibly look to start to utilize, to then piggyback the data that our fire authorities are using, from which they're giving us edict, that will manifest into your property values. It will alter your environment, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Because it's just fire is not one part of the equation. When you alter sustainability, and ASHRAE doesn't get involved, when you alter sustainability in the growth, and AQMD doesn't get involved. I'm shocked that they may codify Zone 0 with what's being proposed. Because you can sell it almost feels like I'm not that healthy right now, and I'm not. I'm really right? I'm not contagious. So why aren't we looking this holistically? We can. My friend, and that doesn't mean run to him and his data. I'm sure it's out there. We can look at this holistically. I believe other cities can unify on a unified platform, can look at this holistically. And we can piggyback the data that CAL FIRE is using to put the finger on us in a right way, but for us to understand, we do want those city trees. We do want that wisteria. We do want our Zone 5 within reason. And okay. So I believe the whiteboarding, the framework and pathway, we can map it. And then I want to speak just for a minute longer. I know I had all my data because I've been working to properly get reason to our insurance folks. I mean, let's be real here. The insurance advocates have been behind a lot of, I'll call it chop chop. Chop chop for the good. They need to be solvent. This is one economy, right? And if we think about State Farm, I'm not going to politicize this. I'm just going to say this. Because even the private sector, and even so many of us have investments that tie in, to something, right? Solvency for all is solvency for one. But politicizing and weaponizing legislation without rationale and reason, and looking at it from a socioeconomic environmental condition, which is what those SBs and ABs, where these zone changes has done, again, my bias, we need to go to proof. So now on a pragmatic level, what happened to our fire safe committee? You probably talked about it. Did not talk about it yet. Well, we should. On that whiteboard, I would circle, I don't know whose brainchild it was, councilman, our city, assistant city manager, whoever. We need to circle that. That's called passive protection, right? We the people, we have arms, legs, mine are getting older. We have sources. And insurance companies don't even recognize our city on the list of cities because we're at such risk. That would reduce our premiums. This is a very complex issue. At a passive level, we could get some more volunteers. I'm not saying I'm going to volunteer. You can tell I'm a talker. You can tell that I'd rather do a injection and intervention with some things that I know to say, let's look at this. And then I'll try to go find money to fund it. And I think the money's there. And I think amongst little cities like Monrovia and blah, blah, the money is there. So fire safe at a local level. Give me a second here. Give me a second. Can you come join me for a minute? Come. I need you to help me a little bit with fire safe, okay? Explain to me.
Anything about it.
Well, you don't, but you do. I'm engaging just for a minute. Sorry, what's your name? Kurt. Thank you, Kurt, for your patience. Come up for just a minute. I'm manipulating this a little bit intentionally.
But she's in a boot, so you want her to maybe sit.
Oh, here, I can take my hand.
Yeah.
Well, just give us a little history. Come here. I want you to look at the camera. You're on camera. I want you to be on camera. Come here.
No, I was looking to somebody who knows.
So almost good afternoon.
And then, yes.
Could you brief us a little bit on the past, what we
Well,
did do and what we might resurrect?
No, that's one of the things that we asked the chief on Tuesday night, because I don't, that's an answer that I want, because I don't know. It stopped a couple of years ago.
So where are we?
Well, that's one of the reasons I'm here, because I want to see.
Is it on here, Kurt? Is watch duty or is that watch duty? Yes. Okay. All right. So there are self-help, get volunteers in, and then there is enhance it with some intervention, where it's maybe the frontline system. I don't know if that's NFPA approved, Chief. I don't know. I don't know if the self-help WASP system that you can attach on your gutters to self-help. I don't know if we have, like neighborhood watch, we can invoke signs that say, fire helpers, we have water. We've actually paid for a pump. The sign that says, you know, instead of ixnay, ixnay is poisonous, here it is. We've got water, we've got a pool, we've got a jacuzzi, we have fire pumps, we have the things we paid for, by example. $5,000, that is NFPA certified, that we prove it gets tested to the chief's expectations. We have that incrementally across the city. All of a sudden, when our system fails, and it's been replaced and prioritized, okay, and it still fails because we don't have enough water in those tanks, we do what they did in the Palisades, or they did, and no one wants to hear say this. I've been counsel, don't say John F. Kennedy or Robert Kennedy, Sir Robert Kennedy. His house is still there because he deployed a roof system off his own water. So I think, and by going so granular and deep, and I'm going to stop now. One more minute. By narrating at such detail with all these fragmented ideas that should be definitely prioritized with the people, for the people, you'll find that you may not have heard me conclude the idea with my friend. Big data can be scrutinized and values applied that become very enabling. It becomes also so enabling that that's how we go get grants, right? That's how we really show the people, not just the simple, you know, we've looked at the metrics for payroll and we need, you know, fires, you know, we need our public safety people to get paid properly. This is a new age and we can't afford those systems, but collectively I think we can. I think it's a matter of cities, the League of Cities of our category, to talk with each other and to prioritize big data for the people in areas of key decision making, whether it's the need of solvency for payroll or if it's for the infrastructure. And all the while, we need to do our job, right? And this one, which I missed, I guess. This was great. Genesis worked great. Smart 911 worked great. Watch duty coming up, I guess. That's an app. All these things are tools. Now we need to embrace it. I'm sorry, I did really pontificate. I really wasn't prepared enough. I thank you.
Tuesday.
All right. Thank you. I'll be a little more scripted and possibly just show it, not talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, that's your phone. Yeah, mine was. The water. Yeah.
Don't forget the water.
Yeah.
So, anybody else? I think now everybody's had a chance, and if anybody has any additional that they want to bring up, that's kind of the gist. So, you're welcome to come on up. I know you're the fire state. He was the one who's referencing your fire state council. So
it's a bit of history. Yes, two things that seem to be coming up now, because it just takes the time it takes, and that's such a phrase that we use too many times these days. So some years ago, I went to a fire safe council meeting down at in San Diego, and on the agenda was the topic of point of sale retrofit, in terms of adding fire screens to your vents, things of that nature, things that the homeowner could do that might become part of the building code. And at that time, the big resistance for it came from the real estate industry, because they didn't want it added to the price tag, which they thought would make it more difficult to sell homes. And so that's pretty much been set aside until now, because we hear lots of talk about what you can do to harden your homes. You really can't brush out the entire hillside. So the idea of fuel modification, San Diego County was asking homeowners out in rural areas to push back a 500-foot dimension beyond what the state fire marshal was asking for, which at one time was 100. I don't know if it's up to 200 now, but you really can't take brush out of the entire hillsides. Where would you ship it and move it to? This is a secondary question. But the I had a phone call from a neighbor who called our former fire marshal, Rich Schneider. She had been told by her insurance adjuster, this would be something on the order of 20 years ago, to chop down all her oak trees. She was mortified. She called Rich and he said, call Caroline. So I talked to her on the phone, and the next thing I did was get in touch with the Southern California chapter of the American Society of Foresters, and we had meetings over at Camp 2, which is at the entrance to JPL, the fire station there. And a committee of about 12 people, he said, we're not going to try to explain this again next week. Just these 12 people that walked to the door tonight are the committee. Because after my neighbor called me and said that her insurance adjuster told her to chop down all the oak trees, my first thing to do was to look online to see what was recommended to plant trees in high fire hazard zones, and oak trees were at the top of the list. So I said to her, all she had was an overzealous fire insurance adjuster that hadn't looked at the planting list for trees for fire zones. The importance is connecting all this information together, and that is always the problem. And the multiple entities right now that are kind of not working counterproductively, but not working with enough sharing, or as they share, it just seems to get lost. So now it's not getting lost, and I applaud that. All right.
Thank you.
To do this again, sorry. You have a beautiful paper that brings up, and I hope this also goes on some type of website or site like that, that's asking for a survey to check on the mitigation plans, things to avoid. Make sure that does get out there, that's important. Things for future use, I know I immediately went down, took all my plants, I put them in huge pots around my house, so that in the next fire, they're now all on rollers. I actually bought plant stand rollers, 250-pound weights for some of my bigger trees that are in these plants. So I can roll them 10, 15, 20 feet away from the house, so nothing goes under the eaves. These are just a couple of the items for in the future that might happen. We have, I'm very happy to say, I'm in an area where our neighborhood watch command immediately put out a massive text to all of us that were on the thing, and now we've brought in more people that somehow moved out, moved in, all that stuff, so they're now updated. They actually went through and had us fill out a questionnaire. Who is medically inclined? Who is structurally inclined? Who can handle plumbing? Who can handle, so in other words, what is your form of special that in case something catastrophic, earthquake, fire, flood, whatever, you can turn around and count on, that's in our immediate area. And that's something I think might be good for everyone knowing to help for the future, as well as getting help from the city. So first things, as I said, my main goal is we start at home first and spread out from there. Check on our neighbors, do what we can for that. And then, if we're blessed enough to have personnel that's not off in another county trying to help out there, by the time they get back, at least we've got our own, we've tried our best. That's all.
Thank you. So that, unless there's somebody else that has a comment, that kind of wraps up the listening for the day. I would highly recommend anybody that, you know, if something pops up, you're gonna shoot us an email, go to the website, or be here next Tuesday, or be here on Tuesday in the evening. But seeing no further conversations, requests, is there any staff that have anything they want to say before we wrap up?
Thank you, Kurt, for the opportunity, and thank you all for taking the time out of your weekend and continued time. I see many familiar faces that are very engaged, and I truly appreciate that. The feedback, the comment was made, good, the bad, the ugly. it's all important. For me to do my job, for my folks to do our jobs, we got to have that feedback. Just a quick briefing, or update, if I will. I know it was mentioned at Tuesday's council, Fire Safe Council. Currently, we will have representation here on Tuesday's meeting, this format, from our folks that are basically volunteering to be on the board. Caroline was on part of this years ago and has been helping them out a little bit, giving them a little bit of guidance. They're in the formation stage of this. It's a big undertaking for volunteers. They're doing their normal jobs and trying to get this going. But basically what they're trying to establish now is the 501c3, which if any of you have done any of this stuff, it's navigation through the state, the filings, all this stuff. I give them credit, I give them kudos. They are not rushing through this. In order for this to work and for it to be successful, they're trying to make sure the foundation is there before they get it going. I spoke with them just this week after our meeting on Tuesday, and we are going to try and ramp up at least the communication efforts, because we have a lot of people that have signed up and shown interest in being part of this, maybe not being on the board, but want to be part of it. So we're going to try and ramp that up a little bit. And part of that is they will be here Tuesday. Hopefully we can maybe carve out a little bit of time where they could speak after to kind of give a status of where they're at and where we're heading. But along the lines, it was spoken to today, and you know, Sierra Madre is unique in a lot of different ways. One of them that we must benefit from is not necessarily the volunteerism, that definitely helps, but community. We cannot do this individually by one department, multiple departments, or anything. Everything has to be done as a community. Ms. Graves spoke to it perfectly, right? Our residents, including myself as a resident, we all have our obligations to all of this. And so that is my challenge to everybody, is to make sure that you're educating yourself. We do our best to get it out there, but we also seek people to be proactive and go get the information for yourself as well. Resource depleted in some cases in the city, so we do our best, but that's why this feedback is important. How can we improve and how do we optimize our resources to best serve everybody here? So again, thank you for being here. Got some good information from you guys. My whiteboard was a piece of paper, so I did take notes, and we'll see what we can do. But with that, my office is always open. Email is there, phone is there. If you have anything for me, please reach out. We can't improve on what we don't know is the importance, right? We can only estimate and guess what is important to the community, but these things are very important to us. So thank you for your time for being here.
I'll be really quick, and again, I want to thank everybody who took the time to come here today. And if I could please plead with you to talk to our community. We did the best we could to try to promote this event. Let's fill this room up on Tuesday. Talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, get the word out. Let's get everybody here on Tuesday. It's important for us to hear what went right, what went wrong, so we could be better prepared for a future event. And with that, thank you, Mayor. Do you have any closing remarks?
I do not.
Thank you.
All right, with that being said, thank you for being here, and I would assume I'll see you Tuesday. Thank you. And we were whiteboarding, you just didn't see it.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's very good. Oh, you were whiteboarding.